Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Friday Ramblings, and this is the last of our Halloween specials for 2023. What we're going to cover today is a bit of a follow-up to a previous Halloween Rambling in which we discussed Marvel characters whose origins are steeped in the supernatural. Well, this time we're giving DC Comics their time in the spotlight with three characters who are all about magic and mysticism. So let's dive right into it. So we can all go back to getting ready for trick-or-treating madness. Yes. We're going to start things off with our only female entry today, and that is the Enchantress. Now again, this is the DC Comics Enchantress. Marvel also had a character named the Enchantress, but we're not talking about her today. The Enchantress is a fictional supervillain, occasional anti-hero, who was created by Bob Haney and Howard Purcell, first appearing in Strange Adventures number 187 in April of 1966. Yep, 1966. Yep. Woohoo. The basic idea of Enchantress was that she was a character who, while in her superhero identity, had a second personality. What back in the day was called a split personality, what we would now refer to more as a dissociative identity, if it was pure mental health, that is, in real life. In this case, it was more of she was possessed by another intelligence, because again, mysticism and magic. June Moon is a freelance artist who was invited to a costume party in an old castle, where she stumbled upon a secret chamber where an unknown magical being, originally called the Succubus, later named as Zamor, empowered her to fight an evil presence in the castle. Saying the words Enchantress, she changed from blonde-haired June to the black-haired and costumed Enchantress, defeating a Minotaur. She would soon also defeat Monster at Cape Kennedy, as well as a few others. However, when she started showing up in and around the DC Universe, she was portrayed more as a misguided character, getting in a fight with Supergirl, in which it is shown that the magical being Zamor is more of a villainous person. This creates the dichotomy. June Moon herself is a generally nice person, but when she taps into magical forces and the Enchantress takes over, she tends to be much more wicked. Ultimately, she would work with the group known as the Forgotten Villains and show up to play a small role in the Crisis on Infinite Earths event. However, she is most noted for her time as a member of the Suicide Squad, occasionally known as Task Force X, wherein she would try to keep her more villainous behavior in check as she was focusing on missions in which failure, well, there's a reason they called it the Suicide Squad. Ultimately, though, when June Moon fails to control the Enchantress, Madame Xanadu is brought in and diagnoses that June's lack of control over the Enchantress side and the fact that tapping into any magical powers tends to let the Enchantress loose is because she started tapping into powers with no training and mental control being taught to her first. Thus, Madame Xanadu gives June a necklace, which helps suppress June's magic until she can be properly taught to control it. It is during this period that it is discovered that the Enchantress persona is in fact a full-blown separate evil entity, not simply a manifestation of her lack of control when tapping magic. Ultimately, this entity was removed. As we said before, the entity now named as Zamor was removed from June's body, leaving her powerless, and thus no longer useful to the Suicide Squad. There she kind of disappears for several years before being dragged into a war in hell known as the Day of Judgment event, where she tries her best not to deal with magic powers, fearing the return of the Enchantress. Ultimately, she is left in a semi-catatonic state due to the events of Day of Judgment, where Sebastian Faust remerges her with the Enchantress persona, mostly to help bring it under control, as it had been wandering freely under the name Aida Sol Ida. A little bit of a pun there. And June continues her misadventures as somebody trying to temper her evil side so she does not become full villain. All of this leads up to the Day of Vengeance, an Infinite Crisis tie-in, in which she works with various other magical beings to try and prevent the Spectre from completely destroying magic in the DC universe. Joining up with these various beings, she ends up forming the super team known as the Shadow Pact. Shadow Pact would work on and off together in various misadventures, during which she continues to struggle to be more of an anti-hero and less of a villain. Which is basically where her portrayal is continuing to be for here on out. Despite the fact that she was a loyal member of the Shadow Pact team, she did, as I said, play with the role more of an anti-hero, where she would occasionally snipe at different members of the team and heavily snark her way through situations. Now, it should be noted that she is not stuck strictly to comics. We're going to go real quick through her other appearances. She appeared in the Legends Tomorrow series. That is that is part of the Arrowverse series owned by the WB. Also appeared in the DC Superhero Girls animated television series, and has shown up in the Harley Quinn animated series. But is most well known for her appearance in the live-action Suicide Squad movie, where she was portrayed by Cara Delevingne. In this, they do continue to use the idea of June Moon and Enchantress as two separate beings. This time, June Moon is an archaeologist who becomes possessed by the spirit of the Enchantress while exploring an ancient temple. She would then be the source of much of the conflict in the Suicide Squad movie, as she would go rogue against the squad to free her brother, the Incubus, during which they tried to conquer Earth. Of course, in this portrayal, she is shown to be fond of wearing as little clothing as possible. In fact, most of what is covering her could frankly pass as body paint. And it really wasn't a great portrayal of her. Honestly, it's not a great movie in general. I try not to be negative, so that's pretty much all we're going to say on her. And we're going to move on from there, except to say she has, of course, shown up in a few different video games based on DC properties. So, good times, good times. Next up is Daniel Cassidy, known as the Blue Devil. Now, Daniel Cassidy's misadventures are kind of an interesting thing in that for a long time in the comics he was portrayed as a lower priority hero, but he was one that had an interesting origin. Daniel Cassidy was special effects wizard and stuntman who was working on a movie called Blue Devil. In order to make the movie look as good as possible, Cassidy created a full-body costume with a hidden exoskeleton and built-in special effects devices. Unfortunately, during filming, a real demon known as Nebros was freed, and Cassidy, in an attempt to prevent it from doing what demons do and destroy everything around it, is blasted with mystical energy, which permanently grafts the Blue Devil costume to his body. Thus, he is essentially permanently trapped in a suit that does not allow any of his human side to be seen. For all intents and purposes, he is a Blue Devil now, in the literal sense. It also tends to turn him into what he refers to as a weirdness magnet, as even when he does not actively try to be a superhero, things tend to happen around him and he gets dragged into the problems. Eventually, Cassidy starts to enjoy the superhero lifestyle and accepts a place in one of the versions of the Justice League of America. He then, of course, gains a sidekick, because all good superheroes need a sidekick of some sort. Eddie Bloomberg, the nephew of Cassidy's longtime movie mogul friend, Marla, who tended to be the only one to hire him, both before and after he became Blue Devil, who built himself a similar suit and christened himself Kid Devil. Kid Devil would later show up as a member of the Teen Titans, but his story is for another time. Eventually, Blue Devil moves into the so-called House of Weirdness, which was basically a good way to write him off of most books. All of this leads into one of the great DC crossover events, Underworld Unleashed, in which the demon Neron, who tends to offer various bargains, goes for a mass business deal-making spree, tempting heroes and villains alike with their greatest wish. Blue Devil being at a point in time where he is deciding to get back into the movie career and spend less time as a superhero, tries to outsmart Neron's bargains and seeks more fame and thrills as an actor. Neron says, sure, all you have to do is destroy this one unmanned building, specifically an electrical substation out in the desert. Blue Devil verifies nobody's working there, verifies there's a relay station down the line that'll prevent any nearby cities from losing power, thus creating, indirect 3-level down effects of harming anybody. Figures, okay, it looks like everything's on the up and up here, blows up the station. Unfortunately, what he didn't know and what Neron knew is that Marla Bloom was nearby in a helicopter scouting locations for a movie. The same mentioned good friend that was always happy to hire him. And as the relay station blew and the nearby power line sparked before the relay station could kick in, her helicopter crashed and she died. This loss of a studio head, even if it was not a major studio, ended, and her well-known good friendship with Daniel is what pays off for Blue Devil's request for better fame and fortune, as now everybody in Hollywood wants to work with him and publicize the story of this tragic loss. See how that goes? That's why you never think you can outsmart a devil when they make a deal. Now, during this time, it should be noted that Blue Devil decides to go after Neron directly, feeling that Neron cheated him and did not explain the full nature of the deal to him. Unfortunately, Neron kills Blue Devil. Here's where things get fun. Cassidy is shortly resurrected, but this time it is no longer a man trapped in a suit. He has become a true Blue Devil. Yep, he is resurrected as a proper demon. This, of course, tends to mess with his head even further, as he's a devout Catholic, and now he can't even go to church. It's sacred ground. He doesn't even have his faith to lean on anymore in troubled times. Shortly after this, he would join up with a version of the Justice League Europe that was attempting to be reunited and featured a lot of other sea-level heroes. This, however, was all a setup by the villain The Mist, and she kills everybody involved, including Blue Devil, having laced the sprinkler systems of the museum she ambushed them at with holy water. However, the aforementioned Sebastian Faust resurrects Blue Devil again, needing his help during the Day of Judgment event. During this time, Blue Devil, fighting in hell, gains a magic trident that he uses as a weapon, specifically in that it has the ability to very quickly banish demons to hell. Still, when it was all said and done, Blue Devil does not stay out of the spotlight very long, and his status as a proper demon shows up during the aforementioned Day of Vengeance event. Because Blue Devil is also a member of the Shadow Pact. You see how that works out? Things tie together. Being a part of the Shadow Pact, Blue Devil messes around with various magical beings, serving as the big heavyweight brawler on the team, as despite his magical trident weapon, he has always preferred to punch out most of his opposition. Eventually, though, the aforementioned Kid Devil would find out about Blue Devil's involvement in the death of Eddie's Aunt Marla, and he would lose one of the few friendships he had, as Eddie did blame Daniel for the death of Marla, feeling that he should have known better as a Catholic to ever make a deal with a demon. Thus, Blue Devil is a man that has a lot of wit, has a lot of tragedy in his life, but never stays down for long because he is bound to hell as a man reborn as a demon. So keep an eye out for him, because anytime he comes around, you know there's going to be trouble. Speaking of troublemakers, we conclude this with Boston Brand, circus trapeze artist whose superhero career began with his death. Murdered by a mobster, he is reborn as Dead Man, a spirit without a body who can possess other people to allow him to create justice in the world. Initially tasked primarily with solving his own murder, he eventually begins interacting with the superhero community and helping balance the scales of good and evil throughout the world, guided by the Hindu god Ramakrishna. And it is during these times that he plays good with various superheroes, most infamously Batman, as Dead Man's habit of bringing justice where there is no justice tends to cross over with Batman, who is, besides the Dark Knight, also a detective. Boston Brand is, like Blue Devil before him, a bit of a witty guy who tries to find the humor in serious situations. And the good news about that is it lets him be one of the few people that can annoy Batman and get away with it, because you can't kill a dead man. Heck, you can't even beat him up since he has no body of his own. Dead Man would show up in the Sins of Youth event, a story centering around the Young Justice team, helping Young Justice member Secret confront Clarion the Witch Boy and his feline familiar Teakle, who is behind the events of the Sins of Youth storyline. He would also show up during the Day of Judgment incident, helping various heroes navigate hell and survive its various traps. Following the Day of Judgment event, a team would form called the Sentinels of Magic, in which served in a similar aspect to the later Shadow Pact. And in fact, the Sentinels of Magic, oh, look at this, also involved Blue Devil and the Enchantress. You see, everybody's tied together. The magic community in DC really interacts a lot, which is why you have to know a little about all of them to fully enjoy the way they play off each other. Sentinels and magic would not last very long, though. As I said, they were eventually supplanted by the Shadow Pact, which had some members in common. However, Deadman's biggest contribution to saving the DC universe, and this will be our big finale, was the 2-in-1, because the one event led into the other, known as Blackest Night and Brightest Day. As a being who was between life and death, Deadman was one of the first to see what was going on when the dead arose during the Blackest Night, and in fact would have to prevent his own zombified resurrection as part of this war on the superhero world. Deadman is able to save his own body from being violated by black rings, during which it is guarded over by his old buddy Blue Devil. Bringing important information about the nature of the Black Lanterns to Hal Jordan, Deadman indirectly helps defeat the Black Lantern threat once and for all. However, what's more important is, in the aftermath of the final battle, Deadman is the only hero left who is still an active member of the newly created White Lantern Corps. He's got his own White Lantern ring. He would be the central protagonist of the Brightest Day event, in which he is tasked to interact, now as a completely regular living person, with various heroes in the DC universe, helping recruit them due to their own connections to the White Lantern and the end of the Blackest Night event, to perform various tasks that would all, in a cosmic sense, merge together to combat one last remnant threat from the rise of the superhero zombies we saw during Blackest Night. I'm not going to give you too many plot-specific details because I do highly encourage you to read both events. It is some of the DC writing at its best. We are going to focus just on specifically what happened to Boston Brand, and that is that he realized being alive again, part of his journey to be a better hero was he had to remember what it was like to be a man. He had been dead so long, and frankly, even when he was alive, had been a bit of a self-centered jerk, that he discovered once he had a body again, he didn't know how to be Boston Brand. Fortunately, he had help from the mystically powered duo Hawk and Dove. More specifically, Dove, aka Dawn Granger, who is not only a pure-hearted person, but, at least in the eyes of Boston Brand, a very cute one at that. Yep, during the various journeys around the DC universe, Boston falls in love with Dawn and vice versa, as her purity helps guide him into comprehending what it means to be a true blue hero and not just a guy who jumps in and out of bodies to help point out who the bad guys really are so other people can take them down. Unfortunately, at the end of the Brightest Day event, Boston Brand becomes Deadman once again, sacrificing himself to save Dawn. And while the status quo is returned in the sense of he's Deadman again, he is Mystic, he must now carry with him the lessons he learned about heroism as well as his love for Dawn, making sure that he ain't just dead, he's still Boston Brand. And remembering that doing such things is what it really means to be alive. And that's one of the things I liked about Brightest Day. The core story was a very human, relatable story. It was a story of Boston Brand rediscovering both himself and what it meant to be human. We're going to wrap things up with that because, well, we've gone a good chunk of time. We've introduced some mystical, magical plots. We've spent a good chunk of time talking about various misadventures in hell. And I've teased y'all with various stories. Day of Judgment, Day of Vengeance, the Sentinels of Magic, the Shadow Pact. Even a little bit of time with Suicide Squad in the case of Enchantress. Lots of good DC stories, big events, some mini-series, some ongoings that didn't go on very long. Unfortunately, not everything runs for, 70, 80, 100 years like Batman and Spider-Man and Superman. Still, these are 3 heroes worth studying, worth getting to know, and worth enjoying. But you better do it now because in just a few days it'll be Halloween. And that means it's time to party with the undead. Party with your favorite ghouls. And since this will be the last rambling before Halloween, I am going to end it with that note of have a happy and safe Halloween. Whether it's costume parties, trick-or-treating, or just curling up on the couch with your favorite scary stories, enjoy yourself, enjoy the holiday, and remember, no matter if it's spooky or not, whether it's magic or not, if it's entertainment, it's good for you. And that's what we are all about here at Roulette Productions. We love Halloween, but we do not like being cruel. Keep it fun, even if it's just a little mischievous. Trick or treat, and God bless.